My name is Alara Vance, and I remember the sensation of falling. It wasn't the swift, terrifying plunge you might imagine, but a horrifying slow-motion descent where every detail of the 18 floors I passed was etched into my retinas. The wind whipped my hair, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white, and the last thing I saw was the silhouette of the man I had loved, the man whose child I carried, staring down at me with a hatred so pure it felt like ice. Then impact. A shattering of bone and hope. The warm, sickening spread of my own blood. The faint, frantic flutter of the life inside me going still. The last of my breath leaving my body in a silent, agonized scream. I opened my eyes. The world snapped back into focus with a dizzying lurch. The sterile, cold air of the penthouse balcony was gone, replaced by the cloying, perfumed atmosphere of a high society ballroom. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead, and the air hummed with the sound of clinking glasses and murmured gossip. I was standing near a towering ice sculpture, a glass of champagne frozen in my hand. I knew this moment. I remembered this dress, a deep emerald green that used to be my favorite. I remembered the date. This was the night the Sterling Empire fell. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic living drum. I was alive. The fall, the blood, the death. It was all real, a searing brand on my soul, but it was also in the future. I had been thrown back in time, back to the beginning of the end. My gaze, sharpened by a lifetime of regret and the clarity of death, swept across the room. And there he was. Kalen Sterling, the once glorious heir to the Sterling fortune. He stood near the entrance, his posture rigid, his handsome face a mask of strained pride. But I could see the tremor in his hands, the shadow of desperation in his eyes. The news of his family's bankruptcy had just broken, and the vultures were circling. "Look who decided to show up," a voice sneered beside me. It was my best friend, Chloe. "The great Kalen Sterling. Does he really think he still belongs here?" I didn't answer. My attention was fixed on the scene unfolding. A man I recognized as Julian Thorne, a rival whose family business Kalen's father had crushed, sauntered up to him. Wasn't he the golden boy of the Sterling family? Julian's voice was loud, carrying over the music. And yet, with his current status, he still has the nerve to show up at this banquet. Soft sneers rippled through the crowd. The Sterlings had fallen, and most of the people present were here to add insult to injury, to mock and ridicule. "He must be here to serve as someone's errand boy," someone else chimed in. Another voice, laced with venom, added, "All he has left is that handsome face. If he went out and sold himself, he might make money faster than now." The laughter that followed was cruel and sharp. In my first life, this was the moment my heart had broken for him. I had seen the proud Kalen, who had never endured such public humiliation, begin to crumble. And I had rushed in. Now I stayed perfectly still. I watched as Kalen's composure shattered. A guttural roar tore from his throat. "Say that again, you bastard." He lunged forward, grabbing Julian by his lapels and swinging a wild fist. Just attending this banquet and facing his former rivals had been a huge challenge for him. Now, cornered and enraged, he only wanted to beat the man to death. But Kalen had long since lost all his power. With his parents gone, who was left to protect him? The other man's friends surged forward. What began as a one-on-one quickly turned into many against one. No matter how strong your fists are, you can't fight numbers and power. Fists and feet connected with sickening thuds. Even though he was being beaten mercilessly, no one dared to step in and help. Before long, Kalen was beaten black and blue, blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Surrounded and exhausted, he collapsed on the polished marble floor, barely breathing. He was nothing like the poised man he once was. I stood to the side, coldly watching the grievance, fury, despair, and hatred flash in his eyes. In my previous life, I couldn't bear to watch. Before they could lay another hand on him, I had forced my way through the crowd, my heart pounding with a misguided sense of pity and duty. "Stop it. That's enough." I had shouted, separating them and smiling as I apologized on his behalf. "I'm so sorry, gentlemen. He's not himself." Yet he had brushed my hand away coldly, his eyes burning with a shame that curdled into spite. "Don't pretend to be kind," he had spat. At the time, I thought he was simply too proud to lower his head after his family's downfall. I didn't take it to heart. Later, when I thought about it again, I realized he had already decided, right then and there, that I was the enemy. Snapping out of my thoughts, Chloe nudged my shoulder and smirked. "I'm telling you, Kalen deserves this. Back then, he relied on his dad's influence in business and left no one a way out. Wasn't he all high and mighty? Now that it's his turn, he can't take it." I curled my lips into a smile, a new, cold feeling settling in my chest. Yeah, I said, my voice unnervingly calm. He really is weak. Having watched enough of the spectacle, I turned and walked toward the center of the banquet, away from the crumpled form on the floor. Kalen, struggling to lean against the wall, lifted his head. His eyes, one already swelling shut, found mine. His lips moved slightly, forming a silent, desperate plea. A beg for help. I only curved my lips into a faint, dismissive smile. It was really ironic. In my previous life, when I stepped in to help him, he hated me for it. In this life, when I stood back and watched, he longed for me to help. I paused for a moment, letting him see me consider it. I saw a glimmer of hope, pathetic and fleeting, flash in his eyes. So I walked over, my heels clicking softly on the floor. I leaned down close enough for only him to hear, my voice a silken whisper laced with poison. Young Master Sterling, I said, if you have time to waste here, why don't you go clean up the wreckage of your company instead? This place isn't for you. I watched, a surge of dark satisfaction warming me from within, as the light in his eyes went gray in an instant. The hope shattered, replaced by a bottomless pit of humiliation and despair. Without my help, Kalen Sterling was nothing but a beaten dog. And I knew in the days to come he would learn just how many enemies he had made. Some people, just to vent their anger, would hire thugs to lurk outside the Sterling mansion just to watch him in his misery. For a time he would become someone everyone wanted to hit. In my previous life, to help him, I had spent my own money to hire bodyguards to keep him safe. I had tried to control public opinion online so it wouldn't spread further. I had burned my own resources to shield him. Now I stood back with my arms crossed, watching him fall into a situation where anyone could bully him. But Kalen, this is only the beginning. In my past life, I spent all my savings to help you return to the business world, only to end up dead with my unborn child. In this life, I absolutely won't give you a chance to rise again. As I walked away, the memory of the fall of his hate-filled eyes on the balcony flashed before me. My fingers tightened around my champagne flute. This time I vowed silently, I will be the one to push you into the abyss. The days following the banquet were a blur of quiet, calculated activity. While Kalen licked his wounds and presumably tried to figure out how to salvage a single brick from the ruins of his life, I was busy. The Sterling Company was crumbling, its assets frozen and its stock value plummeting faster than a stone in water. In my first life, I had watched this happen with a helpless anxiety. Now I saw it as an opportunity. I had already arranged for a series of shell companies and trusted intermediaries to begin buying up Sterling shares at obscenely low prices. Piece by piece, I was locking their remaining assets tightly in my hands. I acquired a minor manufacturing subsidiary that I knew held a patent Kalen would later use as a cornerstone of his comeback. I snatched up a parcel of land his father had purchased for future expansion. With every signature on a contract, I felt a piece of my shattered soul harden into something stronger, something sharper. As for Kalen's current situation, whether he wanted to sell or not, he had no choice. The vultures were real and I was the one leading the flock. I made sure he had to swallow his suffering in silence, that every potential lifeline he reached for was already coiled around my wrist. Yet despite my expectations, he came to me sooner than I had anticipated. A week after the banquet, he showed up at my office. My assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Maria whom I had entrusted with more than just my schedule, announced him with a raised eyebrow. Mr. Sterling is here to see you, Ms. Vance. He's insistent. Send him in, I said, leaning back in my chair. I didn't stand. The man who walked in was a ghost of the Kalen Sterling from the ballroom, who had himself been a ghost of the man he once was. His suit was rumpled, the swelling on his face had subsided to a yellowish bruise, but a new kind of damage lived in his eyes, a raw, festering desperation. He clenched his fists tightly at his sides, his knuckles white. Elara, he began, his voice rough. Kalen, I replied, my tone neutral. To what do I owe the pleasure? He bowed his head, a gesture so foreign to him it was almost painful to watch. I need your help. The words hung in the air. In another life they would have been a balm to my soul, a sign that he finally saw me as an ally. Now they were just sounds. Help. I took a slow sip of water from the crystal glass on my desk. What kind of help could you possibly need from me? He flinched but pressed on. A loan. An investment. Anything. You know what they're doing to me. I have a plan. I can rebuild. I just need a starting point. I let the silence stretch, watching him squirm. Finally I set the glass down. I'm afraid my charity budget is rather stretched this quarter, Kaylin. There are so many worthy causes. His head snapped up, the desperation in his eyes curdling into anger. This isn't about charity. This is about what we had. What we had. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. We had nothing, Kaylin. You had a family fortune and I had a foolish crush. That's all. His expression twisted. The carefully constructed humility shattered. Was it you? He snarled, taking a step forward. Was it you who sent Sienna abroad? Was it you, seeing me fall, who forced her to leave me? Tina. My younger sister. The name was a fresh wound even now. In the past, when he and Sienna were together, no matter what happened between them, I had never interfered. I had buried my own feelings, believing her to be his true love. Now this man, with nothing left in his hands, was venting his anger on me. The weak always lash out at someone weaker. How true that was. I took a slow sip of water, crossed my legs and leaned back lazily in my chair, a picture of utter indifference. Don't you think this is how it should be? I asked, my voice a soft taunt. Do you really think you're capable of making a comeback, especially now? I curled my lips into a scornful smile and looked at him from above, as if judging a particularly unimpressive specimen. In this circle, anyone can crush you. Wasn't I right to send my sister away from a sinking ship? His face froze, turning pale instantly. He clearly hadn't expected me to admit it so bluntly. Beyond his fury, there was mostly despair and helplessness. I had confirmed his deepest suspicion, and in doing so, I had taken from him the last narrative that gave him comfort, that Sienna had been stolen from him. Now he had to face the fact that she, and by extension I, had simply walked away from his ruin. Kaylin's expression twisted, but a shred of his old haughtiness returned, pathetic and misplaced. I will rebuild my career, he declared, his voice trembling with the effort. When that time comes, Alara, don't blame me for being ruthless. Even if Sienna helps you, I won't forgive you. I only shrugged, my relaxed demeanor making him even angrier. I'll keep that in mind. His face darkened, a storm of impotent rage. He looked as if he wanted to say more, to smash something, but he had nothing. No power, no leverage, not even the dignity to sustain his anger. With a sound of pure frustration, he slammed his hand against the doorframe and stormed out. In this life I didn't pretend to be kind. Yet he no longer accused me of stealing his company's secrets. The script had flipped. In my previous life he had doubted me but still used me as a stepping stone. I was the one who helped him manage his business, find reliable partners and suppliers, and recruit new talent. There were even rumors about us circulating outside. I had done it all, believing I was building a future for us. On the day his company went public in that other life, he had proposed to me in front of the live streaming cameras. The public opinion immediately exploded, and that day's entertainment news instantly boosted the company's value. He knelt on the ground, his face full of a sincerity I now knew was fabricated. Alara, marry me. Without you, how could I have today? I had reflexively refused, my heart a confused tumult, but he had grabbed my hand tightly, his eyes pleading. Can we walk the road ahead together? I'll be the most attentive partner. It's been so long. Don't you trust me? His eyes had trembled slightly. I wasn't looking for love and marriage. What I needed was a suitable partner who could support me on the road ahead. That had seemed enough, so I had nodded. With my help, his company then sailed smoothly, making a spectacular return to the business world and regaining its footing. And I had fallen into unending remorse. The memory was a brand, solid and never fading. Snapping back to the present, I looked at the empty doorway where Kaylin had stood. A plan began to form in my mind, cold and precise. He thought he could rebuild. He thought he still had a chance. He was clinging to the hope of a comeback like a lifeline. I needed to give him that hope. I needed to make him believe it was real. Because nothing destroys a man more completely than having his dreams dangled before him, only to be ripped away at the moment of triumph. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I needed a useful helper, someone he would never suspect. The Hughes family, while not the top 1 or 2 in the business world, still held some standing. More importantly, Diana Hughes owed me a favor. I immediately called her. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Alara, this is a surprise. Diana, I said, my voice smooth as silk. I have a business proposition for you. How would you like to make some money and have a front row seat to the fall of a once great name? There was a pause on the other end. You're going to have to be more specific. It's about Kaylin Sterling. She exhaled sharply. That trust fund rich kid? Alara, are you going to help him? He wouldn't even throw his dirty money at me and say, "I don't need your filthy cash." I tilted my head, fidgeting with my pen. Help him? Of course not. I'm telling you to put on a show. Are you actually going to give him the money? I could almost hear her skeptical frown. What do you mean? You just need to wait until he completely trusts you, I explained. After the two of you reach a cooperation agreement, you can take the money and run. There was a longer pause. Alara, this isn't really about the money. The main point is that Kalen isn't an idiot. We have no prior dealings, so how could he possibly trust me now? And actually carrying out a plan to run away is another matter. I smiled. He's cornered now. What choice does he have? As for how to escape, a small loophole in the contract would do. He's alone now without an assistant. Even if he violated the contract, he didn't have money to hire a good lawyer. I suddenly thought of Kalen. He seemed to have plenty of enemies. They would probably be more than happy to take part. In fact, I added, I know a few lawyers who would be very interested in pro bono work to ensure he can't fight back. Diana hesitated for a moment and then laughed. That works. Good thinking. So you're in. I'm in, she said, her voice now laced with a predatory glee. But you were right, this is more fun than the money. Good, I said. I'll transfer the initial funds to you. Make it look convincing. Let him think he's found his savior. As I hung up, I felt a cold certainty settle over me. Kalen was clever too. He would never mention to anyone that Diana was secretly helping him. He would hoard this perceived advantage, this secret weapon, believing he was outsmarting everyone. He had no idea he was walking directly into the trap I was building brick by brick. The stage was being set for his second and final humiliation. A month passed. To the outside world, it seemed the Sterling family had completely collapsed, their name a cautionary tale whispered at parties. Kalen had disappeared from public view, and most assumed he had slunk away into well-deserved obscurity. I, however, knew better. Through Diana, I received regular updates. Kalen, fueled by a toxic mix of desperation and lingering arrogance, had thrown himself into his comeback, with a fervor that was almost impressive. He was clever, I'd give him that. He never once mentioned Diana's involvement to anyone, keeping his supposed ace hidden up his sleeve. He spent his days in a shabby rented office, poring over old business plans and making frantic, hushed phone calls. He was a puppet and I was the one holding all the strings, watching him dance to a tune only I could hear. Then the silence broke. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when a new wave erupted online. The headlines were spectacular, just as I knew they would be. The Phoenix rises. Kalen Sterling's spectacular comeback. Sterling heir to reclaim family legacy. The articles detailed how Kalen had publicly announced he would buy back the companies the Sterlings had sold off and make them subsidiaries of his newly founded corporation, Phoenix Holdings. It was considered a bombshell in the business world. The comment sections were a mix of awe and skepticism, but the sheer audacity of the move had people talking. I curled my lips into a smile as I read the news on my tablet, then switched to my messages to type a reply to Diana, who was now acting as his de facto secretary. He's taken the bait, her message read. He wants to buy your subsidiary, the old manufacturing plant. He's offering twice the initial price. He's desperate to make a show of strength. I agreed immediately. Draw up the contract. Stipulate that the payment has to be transferred into my account within 1 month. Any breach will result in a $30 million penalty. A $30 million penalty for a man with nothing. It was a beautifully crafted noose. He's so arrogant now, Alara, Diana wrote. He feels as if he's standing on solid rock. He's been going online to challenge his old rivals. His tone, it's disgusting. I didn't need to see it to believe it. I could imagine him sitting in that cheap office, feeling the intoxicating rush of power returning. He would be puffing out his chest, believing he was outsmarting everyone. Alara Vance, was just another fool he was manipulating, selling him assets to fuel his own rise. He even made a vague post, one I knew was directed at me. Kalen Sterling, will repay every humiliation I've suffered. And as for certain individuals who thought I was finished, just wait for our next meeting. Alone in my sunlit office, I couldn't help but laugh aloud. Really? I whispered to the empty room. I'm looking forward to it even more than you are, Kalen. The fair weather crowd, of course, recognized the shifting winds and rushed to curry favor with him, while others secretly joined forces to figure out how to take him down. They didn't know they were irrelevant. The takedown was already scheduled. The day of the company's supposed public launch arrived. Kalen, in a moment of poetic irony that he was too blind to see, had planned to do just what he had in my previous life. He would stand under the gaze of countless live stream cameras and a crowd of reporters, and announce the triumphant return of the Sterling name. He had arrived with Diana and a few other investors, people I had quietly arranged, their names listed as headliners for the event. I sat in my living room, a live stream of the event playing on my large screen. The cameras were focused on the gleaming glass facade of the building he was using as his new headquarters. A building Diana had secured for him, its ownership details conveniently obscured in the contract he had been too eager to read properly. The scene was set. Reporters milled about, their cameras ready. Kalen stood at a makeshift podium, looking more like his old self than he had in months. He wore a new, expensive-looking suit. His hair was perfectly styled and a triumphant, if slightly strained, smile was plastered on his face. Diana stood beside him, the picture of supportive elegance. Yet time dragged on. The other partners still hadn't arrived. People started getting restless. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Why aren't the others here yet?" a reporter near the camera asked. "Can so many people really all be late?" I saw Kalen's smile tighten. He frowned and began calling each of them one by one. I watched, my champagne flute poised in my hand, as his face grew darker and darker with each rejected call. He wasn't stupid. He was beginning to realize he might have been tricked. He forced a stiff smile and turned back to the microphones. "Sorry everyone. Really sorry. Something unexpected came up today. The others couldn't make it. We'll reschedule for another day, another time." The media, of course, was displeased. They had been promised a spectacle. "Mr. Sterling," one bold journalist called out, "you invited us here. Now you're saying everyone else couldn't come. Moreover, you've displayed such a large company here. At the very least, you should let us take some photos inside before we leave, shouldn't you?" Kalen stiffened. He couldn't just let them leave empty-handed, but he couldn't say anything either. A crowd of people began pushing him to go into the company building, a wave of collective curiosity turning aggressive. But as soon as they reached the entrance, security guards blocked everyone. "What are you doing?" one of the guards barked. "Do you know where you are? No photos. Put down all your cameras." The reporters only raised their cameras higher. "Mr. Sterling, control your staff. Let us in." Kalen stared coldly at the guards, and then I saw it. The dawning horror on his face as he suddenly noticed that the faces at the door didn't match any of the people he had seen just yesterday. "You're new here, aren't you?" he said, his voice tight. "I'm your boss, Kalen Sterling. Move aside. I won't hold you responsible for this today." The guards looked at him, but instead of moving aside, they stepped forward 2 paces. The lead guard, a large man with a bored expression, sneered. "Kalen Sterling, you're not our boss. Our boss is Diana Hughes. Get out now. And all of you. No filming allowed here." The scene fell into a dead silence. Then someone whispered under their breath, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. "The dog doesn't even care about its master anymore." Kalen's face turned a blotchy, ugly red. "From now on, all of you are fired. Get out of my company." The dozen guards stared at him as if they had just heard a joke. "If we don't curse you a few times, you really think you're the boss?" One of them laughed. "Our company boss is Diana." "Oh right. Didn't you just say your name is Kalen Sterling? We're blocking you. You specifically." Kalen's expression went rigid, his face alternating between green and pale. "Impossible. You've made a mistake. I have a cooperative relationship with Diana. I'm also your boss." Only then did the media snap out of their stunned silence. Then a dozen cameras turned and locked onto Kalen. All they needed was a hot story with a main character. What had actually happened didn't matter at all. "Mr. Sterling, may we ask, do you and your partners have a falling out? Or did you never actually reach an agreement with them and you're using the media for some kind of scandalous PR? Do you think after today you can still stand firm in the business world? If you don't even have a company, is your so-called acquisition of the Sterling subsidiary even real? Do you still have the ability to buy it back?" The questions came like gunfire. Now Kalen became the laughingstock of the business world, slapped in the face in front of a live audience. Instantly, the media catapulted him onto the hot-ranking list of the most talked-about names in business. It wasn't for the triumphant return he had envisioned, but for his spectacular, humiliating failure. I watched the live stream laughing as I dialed Diana. She hadn't expected things to go so smoothly either. "But you were right, Ilara," she said, her voice giddy. "When I gave him the contract, he didn't even look at it. My contract was 20 pages shorter and he signed in a rush. I'm just worrying he might come after us later 'cause trouble." Hearing the arrogance in her voice, I tapped my fingernail against the phone. Stop it. What can he do to you alone? This is only the beginning. He's already furious enough as it is. His ability to withstand pressure is really weak. Diana hesitated for a moment. Alara, I really want to know what exactly happened between you and him. From the way you talk, it sounds like you're still not done venting. Of course I'm not done. My voice was cold. If I hadn't had the chance to do this again, 2 lives would already be gone in his hands. Right now he's only lost a company. I can't let him off that easily. You'll know later. I let Kalen skulk and hide for a week after that. This time he didn't make any moves online, letting the public opinion spread. He was probably too scared to show up at all. His grand comeback had been exposed as a sham, a house of cards built on my lies and his desperation. The puppet had realized his strings were being pulled and the dance was over. But the performance wasn't. The next act was about to begin, and it would feature a player I hadn't expected to enter the stage so soon. My sister Sienna. Her call came on a rainy afternoon, an unexpected intrusion into my carefully laid plans. The butterfly effect of my rebirth was beginning to show its wings. The call from Sienna was a discordant note in the symphony of my revenge. By all accounts at this point in time, she should have been busy preparing for her wedding abroad to the wealthy foreign businessman she had left Kalen for. Lee was his name. In my first life, their marriage had been a gilded cage that ended with her being stabbed by his mistress. Her early return was a variable I hadn't anticipated, a ripple from the stone I had thrown into the pond of time. Still, I picked up the phone, my voice carefully neutral. Sienna. This is a surprise. Alara. Her voice was small, trembling. It was a stark contrast to the confident, almost cruel woman who had sold the sterling trade secrets and wiped her hands clean. In more than 20 years, this was the first time I'd heard her sound so broken. Hello, Alara. This is rare, isn't it? What do you want, Sienna? A shaky breath. I want to come back home. Could you help me buy a plane ticket? I kept my face expressionless, though there was no one to see it. What's wrong? Lee. She whispered, her voice cracking. He cheated me out of all my money. He even beats me. Please, Alara, please help me. The plea was pathetic, and a part of me, the part that remembered being pushed from a balcony, felt nothing. Why was the Sienna from this life calling me now? In my previous life we had absolutely no contact after she fled. Could this be some butterfly effect caused by my rebirth? Had my actions altered her path? Or was there something more? Fine. People only show their real faces when they're right under your eyes. Having her close where I could watch her was better than having her as an unknown element scheming in the shadows. Fine, I said, my tone devoid of warmth. I'll arrange it. After Sienna returned home, our way of living together was a tense, silent pantomime of normalcy. She moved through the house like a ghost, her eyes darting around nervously. She was a far cry from the vivacious, treacherous sister I remembered. Nothing seemed unusual until one evening. Oh, Alara, she said, her voice artificially bright. Tonight I'm bringing a friend over. You'll be home tonight, right? I looked at her, this stranger wearing my sister's face, and nodded lightly. I'll be here. A few hours later, under the guise of domesticity, I saw my chance. Sienna, I called out, holding a small bag of kitchen trash. Help me throw this out, will you? I handed it to her, raised my head and smiled straight at her. There's soda inside. It might attract bugs. She pressed her lips together, a flash of impatience flickering in her eyes, but she still took it, the dutiful sister. Sure. Watching her leave, I moved quickly. The moment the front door clicked shut, I grabbed her phone from the coffee table. My heart was a steady, cold drumbeat. I tried a few passwords. Her birthday, Lee's birthday, Kalen's birthday, before it finally unlocked with our mother's maiden name. On the screen was her chat history with Kalen. My blood ran cold, not with surprise but with a grim vindication. So that's why she came back so early. Sienna. Kalen, I love you. Can you trust me? I can help you get through this crisis. Kalen, how? You left me. You sold the secret. Sienna. I know this method may not be right, but if you just do what I say, it'll work. Propose to my sister. She likes you. She'll agree. She'll help you rebuild your career. Kalen. Propose to Alara? Are you insane? Sienna. As for us, once you succeed, I'll always wait for you. This is the only way now. Trust me, you'll definitely get back what's yours. Kalen. What about her? After all, she's your sister. Sienna. When your career is big enough, handling one person won't be a problem. I gently wiped off the phone and tossed it back where it was, My hands steady though a storm raged inside me. So that was it. I had been reborn, and of course the other players could act differently too. In the previous life after she married, Sienna had also kept in touch with Kaylin, but she was already someone's wife and returning from abroad wasn't as simple. Maybe she wanted to avoid the fate of being stabbed to death by the other woman. Or maybe her marriage had already been full of cracks. Given a chance to do it over, she naturally chose the man she loved, and saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone to be used and discarded. Sienna, I truly hadn't planned to do anything to you, but you don't want to be my sister. Then I won't give you that chance anymore. Night fell. The stars were sparse, most hidden by the city's haze. Who knew when I'd be able to see a sky full of stars again? I stood by the window, slowly withdrawing my gaze toward Sienna and Kaylin as they entered the living room. They had been exchanging covert, meaningful glances, but when they saw me looking their way, they instantly pulled back as if nothing had happened. I felt amused and watched in silence for a while. Those two really were a perfect match, each more disgusting than the other. Kaylin held a bouquet of red roses, the gesture so transparent it was pathetic. He looked at me, his face a mask of contrite sorrow. I'm sorry, Alara, about the past. I'm sorry. I was too impulsive. I crossed my arms and nodded, playing along. Yeah, you really should apologize. I let my eyes drift to the roses. But why isn't that bouquet for my sister? Kaylin's jaw stiffened. He reached out and held the roses toward me. Before. I was wrong, Alara. The truth is, the one I like is you. This bouquet is for you. He glanced at Sienna, who gave a tight, encouraging nod. I've already told Sienna. I also know how you feel about me. Then he slowly knelt down, taking a small velvet box from his pocket and opening it. A diamond ring glittered inside, cheap and gaudy compared to the one he'd given me in another life. I know I have nothing right now, he said, the words clearly rehearsed, but trust me, we'll have a good future. If you don't mind, I'll be the one to walk with you for the rest of your life. Will you, Alara? I lowered my eyes and looked back at Sienna. Sienna, you didn't notice, did you? Sienna forced a smile, a terrible actress. Why would I not notice? Kaylin is a good man. If the two of you truly love each other, of course I'll give you my blessing. But I did notice, I said softly. I sat in my chair, crossed my legs and let Kaylin kneel there on the floor while I studied him from head to toe, sneering inwardly. What a joke. Now he's bankrupt with 1 cent to his name. What woman would marry a man like that? Do you think I'm crazy? I asked, my voice clear and cutting in the silent room. The expressions on Sienna's and Kaylin's faces were unforgettable. They both went deathly pale. They hadn't expected me to humiliate them like this. Even someone with no sense wouldn't pick someone like this to be their partner, right? I continued, my gaze shifting to Sienna. At first my sister didn't need this man, and now you're pushing her toward me. What are you trying to do? Kaylin sprang up suddenly, the ring box clattering to the floor. He stared at Sienna, his eyes full of sudden, sharp scrutiny. What is she talking about, Sienna? Sienna's pupils constricted. Reflexively, she clutched at her skirt. The silence in the living room was thick enough to choke on. Sienna's face was a perfect mask of panicked guilt, and Kaylin's was a thundercloud of dawning betrayal. No, Kaylin, it wasn't like that, Sienna stammered, her eyes darting between us. Back then I had no choice but to leave. But now you like Alara. Of course I won't interfere. I raised an eyebrow, feigning nonchalance as I took a slow sip of wine. Fine. Mostly I really just can't stand him, sis. I let my gaze drift back to Kaylin, who was vibrating with rage. If I were you, I certainly wouldn't want to marry him either. Kaylin turned to me, his furious eyes burning. What if Sienna is my lover? What then? I looked at him coldly, a predator finally tiring of its prey's struggles. I'm talking to my sister. Are you going to butt in now? I let my voice drop, lacing it with a quiet, menacing promise. Listen, Kaylin, just for the fact that you've made enemies across the business world. If I even hint at your whereabouts, your 2 legs will soon be crippled. Shut up. His face went bone white. The threat, delivered so calmly, was more effective than any shout. He clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking, but he didn't dare say another word. The beaten dog remembered its place. I curled my lips and glanced back at Sienna. Why aren't you saying anything? Come on, Sienna. What if you actually marry him and then your ex, Lee, flies back from abroad and hunts him down? What then? If he gets too arrogant and kills you, what would you do? Sienna's expression shifted from panic to something colder, more calculating. She looked at me with a mix of weariness and a spark of pure hatred. I had laid her plan bare and salted the earth it was meant to grow on. Kaylin frowned, confused. In the previous life, Sienna didn't marry Lee for another year, and only then did Kaylin learn she'd found someone else. Now that I'd put it out in the open, the meaning changed entirely. The lover he thought had been forced away by a sister's pressure had actually rejected him outright and immediately found someone new. The seed of doubt I planted was already taking root, and I could see it festering in his eyes. But pushing things this far still wasn't enough. They needed to turn on each other completely. I looked at Kaylin as if offering Sienna a way out, a final cruel twist of the knife. Go home first, I said to him, my tone dismissive. We'll discuss some things another day. I then turned to Sienna, my voice sugary with false concern. Sell the ring quickly and keep some money, at least enough to buy a few outfits later. It looks cheap, but it might be worth something. Kaylin glared at me, then at Sienna, his expression a tortured mix of fury, humiliation, and suspicion. He seemed furious enough to explode. With a guttural sound of pure rage, he slammed the front door so hard the frame shook, storming out into the night. Lucky for him, he'd been reborn too, right? He thought he knew how this story went. He was about to learn he knew nothing. The moment the door closed, Sienna rounded on me. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin, her eyes searching my face for any sign of panic or surprise. You, she hissed. This life. You don't like Kaylin anymore. Sometimes I had to marvel at the two of them. They were a perfect match. Both hopelessly irrational. I smiled and pushed her hand away with effortless strength. Aren't you the same? What's there to be surprised about? Sienna narrowed her eyes, a feral glint in them. Before I could say anything else, she suddenly laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Of course. From the start, the one he really liked was me. You suffered a lot in the last life, didn't you? Her fingernails were still poised as if to claw at me. I curled my lips, my smile never reaching my eyes. You're wrong, Sienna. You really do like him, don't you? But what man in this world is trustworthy? I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper. When you died, I was pregnant. Your death. To him, it all seemed to mean nothing. I watched Sienna's face grow colder and colder, and I calmly kept pouring oil on the fire. Do you really think he's the same as before? That after he gains wealth and glory again, he'll come back to rekindle your old flame? I let out a soft, pitying laugh. Don't be naive, little sister. He's already begun to doubt you. All it will take is a single spark to burn everything down. I didn't wait for her response. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the middle of the living room, the truth of my words sinking in like poison. The next morning, I sent Kaylin an anonymous message from a burner phone. The stolen company secrets. No need to overthink it. Maybe it wasn't even an internal employee who had access. Look closer to home. He only replied with guarded suspicion. Who is this? Why are you helping me? I curved my lips without flushing or skipping a beat. I'm just idle and feeling charitable. Don't believe me? Fine. He didn't say anything more, but I knew he would investigate. What I had always counted on wasn't my kindness, but his bottomless capacity for suspicion. The following week, Sienna became a ghost in the house, coming and going at odd hours. I had no idea what she was busy with, and I didn't care. I was laying the final pieces of my trap. Until one evening, as I sat in the living room calmly eating fruit, a blood-curdling scream erupted from her bedroom. She ran out, her face contorted with fury, clutching her phone. Who did this? She shrieked. I'm going to kill them. How dare the media write about me like this? I calmly opened my phone. The latest news headlines were plastered with Sienna's name. The articles accused her of being a homewrecker, of chasing money back in school, of other sleazy behavior. Every insulting and lewd word imaginable had been pinned on her. Most of it was true. The rest must have come from whatever she'd been doing lately. The comment section was a flood of ridicule and curses. This girl's disgusting, chasing a taken man like some filthy mistress. Isn't this Sienna Vance? I heard she sold out her last boyfriend for cash. Sienna grabbed my hand, her grip frantic. Alara, please help me. I can't have them writing about me like this. I blinked and slowly withdrew my hand, looking at the woman who just days ago had been scheming with a man on how to use her own sister. Fully I smiled. Sienna, it's not that I don't want to help you. You know as well as I do. This kind of news is just gossip. It'll be hot for a while and then no one will care. I looked at her as if guiding her, a benevolent older sister. But we need to find the source. If whoever's behind this refuses to stop and keeps paying to push hot searches, no amount of clarification will matter. I paused, letting the idea take root. Have you offended anyone lately? And you've only just come back to the country. It must be someone you know, right? The scandal kept spreading. No matter how Sienna tried to explain online, even spending money to hire people to fake testimonies, the videos and articles still spread like wildfire. Whoever was behind it clearly wanted to destroy her. As time passed, Sienna's mindset shifted from urgently trying to manage the crisis to spiraling into a frenzied state, ready to drag the other party down with her. There was no doubt Kalen was behind this. He had taken my anonymous hint and run with it, convincing himself Sienna was the true architect of his downfall. But for things to have blown up so big, he must have poured all his remaining savings into buying traffic and striking ruthlessly. He must have already learned who had taken the company's secret. With his parents both dead, could he really still love Sienna as before? It was laughable. The love between them had never been clean. All that was left was for the two of them to bite each other like dogs. I spent a little money to trace the media sources and plant the evidence, making it undeniable. In front of Sienna, I showed her the proof. It's him, I said softly, showing her a fabricated trail that led straight to Kalen's doorstep. He's doing this to silence you. To punish you for leaving him. She couldn't hold back her fury. She was about to storm over to Kalen's place, her eyes wild. But as she reached the door, she suddenly turned back. The hatred burning in her eyes could no longer be hidden. Elara Vance, she hissed, her voice trembling with venom. I'm telling you, whether it's Kalen or not, I won't forgive you. The two of you, filthy man and woman. I said nothing, only gave a mocking little smile. I picked up a small fruit knife from the coffee table, its blade sharp and gleaming under the lights. Oh really? I asked, my voice a soft, dangerous purr. I'll be waiting to see it with my own eyes. She sneered, stepped forward and tried to yank the knife from my hand. This time I couldn't hold back a low, genuine laugh. I let her take it. She didn't come home all night. Something had clearly happened over at Kalen's, but I wasn't in a hurry. I waited until the next day, the picture of a concerned sister, before calmly calling the police. Hello, I said, my voice laced with believable worry. I'd like to report a disturbance and possibly an assault. My sister, Sienna Vance, went to see a man named Kalen Sterling last night and she hasn't returned. I'm very frightened for her safety. The police responded with an efficiency that spoke to the address I had given them, a dilapidated part of town where Kalen was now squatting. I arrived shortly after, blending into the crowd of neighbors and bystanders that had gathered, their faces alight with morbid curiosity. The air buzzed with gossip. A man with a knife killed someone, a woman whispered loudly to her friend. The woman was stabbed once in the heart. They say it's about some kind of love affair. I stood in the crowd, a silent spectator to the final act of the tragedy I had written. The door to the rundown apartment building opened, and the police emerged, leading a handcuffed Kalen. His face was a mess of scratches, his clothes disheveled, and his eyes held a wild, uncomprehending horror. He looked like a cornered animal. It wasn't me, he screamed, his voice raw and breaking. She hurt me first. She deserved it. That woman deserved to die. It wasn't me. Don't arrest me. I'm the Sioux. You can't arrest me. Let me go. No. It wasn't me. She was holding the knife herself. Looking at his crazed state, I felt nothing but a deep, settling satisfaction. Everything was going exactly as planned. Kalen would never forgive Sienna, the one who had, in his mind, stolen his company's secret and led to his parents' deaths. Sienna may have had a knife, but the difference in strength between a man and a woman meant her death was no accident. The coroner would rule it a homicide. Prison was the destination I had prepared for Kalen. Despair and endless coldness would wrap around him. I wanted him to die in darkness. Gasps rose around me. That's a murderer. Heard the woman was cheating. He caught her. Disgusting, really. The both of them. I curled my lip at the chatter, listening to it as if it were background music. Kalen was bent double under the police's grip, being led toward the squad car. He turned his face and his eyes, desperate and searching, found mine in the crowd. At the moment our eyes met, his pupils shrank to pinpricks. His expression twisted with a ferocious, dawning understanding. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was certainty. It was you, he breathed, his voice a ragged whisper that carried in the sudden hush. Then it erupted into a roar. It was you. I curved my lips in a faint, unmistakable smile. That's right. It was me. Kalen, like a madman, roared at me, struggling hard against the officers. Elara Vance. You and your sister are both filthy, Damn it, I'll kill you. It's all your fault. You ruined me. His frightening look made the crowd tremble. Several older people furrowed their brows and began throwing whatever they had at him. A crumpled paper cup, a half-eaten apple. The police slowed their pace, letting the crowd pelt Kalen until his whole body was smeared and disheveled. Even a child threw a rock that struck his head hard. All right, one officer said, coughing twice without much conviction. This is illegal. Everyone stop. They pushed him into the car. Before he was taken away, Kalen's eyes stayed locked on me. If looks could kill, I'd have been turned to ashes hundreds of times already. I only smiled faintly. I'll come see you again, I mouthed. We'll meet again in prison. Weeks later, after the sensational headlines had died down, I did just that. The visiting room was cold, smelling of antiseptic and despair. When Kalen was led in, clad in orange, the change in him was staggering. The last vestiges of the proud young master were gone, replaced by a hollowed-out shell. His eyes were dead. He picked up the phone on his side of the glass. I did the same. It's been such a long time and no one's come to see you. Huh. I began, my voice sweetly mocking. Look at you. So pathetic. Only I'm willing to take time to visit. You should be thanking me. Kalen held the phone, staring at me in silence. His eyes were strange. So strange, not the weary look he usually had. They were knowing. After facing my taunting, his breath quickened and his eyes glinted with a feral light. Elara Vance, he said, his voice horribly hoarse. Just because I misunderstood you, you did this to me. Do you know you're destroying my entire life? He leaned forward, his forehead almost touching the glass. If both you and I were given a chance to start over, why did you have to push me into this situation? And then I understood. So he had been reborn too. The knowledge settled in me not as a shock but as a final confirmation. This wasn't just revenge, it was a reckoning across lifetimes. I leaned back gently in my chair, the picture of calm. And you thought that starting over once all the sins you've committed, do you think they can just vanish? I tilted my head. And besides, no one forced you into this. If you hadn't done these things, why would you be sitting here now? Kalen gripped the phone tightly, his eyes burning with endless rage. Elara Vance, my entire good life was destroyed by you. You ruined me. I ruined you? I sneered. Don't forget, everything you ever had was because I gave it to you. You wagged your tail and begged like a dog. If I hadn't pitied you, do you think I would have thrown you a bone? I looked him up and down. Disgusting. Kalen's chest heaved, his expression rigid. When harshness failed, he tried soft words, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Elara, before I misunderstood you, I didn't investigate the truth and I harmed you and the child. We were husband and wife. Please forgive me. Testify for me in court. Get my sentence reduced. When I get out, we can live like before. I'll make it up to you. I promise. I let out a cold, sharp laugh that echoed in the quiet room. Do you really think that after being reborn, even if you walk free one day, you still have a chance to turn things around? My words drained the color from his face. I had struck the truth. He had hoped his knowledge of the future was his secret weapon, but I had just proven it worthless. Then I pulled out a folded document from my bag and held it up against the glass. It was the contract for the manufacturing plant with the $30 million penalty clause clearly highlighted. Look closely, Kalen. $30 million in breach penalties. Even in prison, don't forget to pay your debts. Kalen shot to his feet, his face twisting in cruelty and rage. It's you. It's all you. I nodded calmly. And don't forget that company of yours and Diana's. Sure, it's under your name, but it's tied to unpaid wages and illegal profits. I've already handed everything to the courts. I gave him a sweet, vicious smile. You'll be rotting in prison for a long, long time. His face went pale as paper, his eyes losing focus. Satisfied, I stood and turned to leave. Behind me, Kalen suddenly went mad, slamming against the glass, screaming curses so foul the words blurred into a single enraged scream. The sound of his forehead pounding against the barrier, thud, 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 echoed through the room like a crazed animal. His eyes were bloodshot, teeth gnashing. It took 2 guards with batons to finally subdue him, dragging his convulsing, broken body away. I glanced back one last time, then walked out without a second look. Enjoy it, Kalen. This is the life you deserve. When I walked out of the prison, I lifted my head. The night sky was for once clear. It was filled with stars, each one shining jewel-like against the velvety darkness. Their quiet, constant beauty stirred something deep in me, something that had been frozen solid for a long time. Time itself seemed to slow, peaceful and steady. After the dust settled, the world returned to its original brilliance, and I had plenty of time now to savor it. My life had started anew. From that moment on, I no longer cared about Kalen. He was nothing but a dark chapter, a ghost I had erased with my own hands. My focus turned to the Vance Corporation, to building something that was truly wholly mine, untainted by the specters of the past. Yet months later, through whispers in the business world and the occasional report from a source I kept on retainer, news of him still trickled in. It wasn't out of pity or lingering attachment, but from the cold, detached curiosity of a victor surveying the battlefield. Kalen Sterling, once arrogant at the top, was now just another nameless prisoner in a crowded, brutal system. No longer the young master, he had become prey. The world inside was a merciless mirror of the one he had once dominated. Other inmates, some his family had ruined in business, others who simply saw him as weak and pretty, beat him often. Not always from personal vendetta, but from the simple, savage law of the jungle that governed that place. The weak get devoured. Once the report said he had tried to fight back. The old pride had flared and he'd swung a fist at a man twice his size. He ended up with 2 broken ribs and a concussion, spending weeks in the prison hospital. When he returned, his pride was gone, truly gone. He became a shadow, skulking in corners, performing the most degrading tasks just to survive, just to avoid the next blow. That $30 million penalty still loomed. The court seized everything. He was forced to sell his remaining possessions. The expensive watch he'd managed to hide, his custom-made suits, and finally, in the ultimate indignity, his family's burial plot. Yet it wasn't nearly enough. The debt piled up, a mountain he could never climb, until the court officially declared him permanently bankrupt. The Sterling name was not just fallen, it was financially erased. The final report was the most poignant. One stormy night, the sound of the rain and thunder masking his actions, he tried to end it all. He used a smuggled, sharpened piece of metal and bit through his own wrist, aiming for the artery. But he failed. He was found, patched up, and thrown into solitary confinement for his own protection. From then on, he lived like a walking corpse. The guards said the light in his eyes never returned. He was trapped not only by bars, but by regret and endless, gnawing torment. There were no visitors. No one remembered him. His father was dead, his mother was dead, his lover was dead by his own hand. He rotted in a profound loneliness, and I knew that was the punishment most fitting for a man like him. Not a quick death, but the slow, meticulous torture of time and a conscience that had finally, far too late, awakened. As for Sienna, her body was buried quietly in a pauper's section of the cemetery. There was no grand funeral. Our parents, long past, were spared this final disgrace. The rumors about her continued to spread, morphing and growing, until she became a symbol of betrayal and greed, a cautionary tale for ambitious social climbers. The family never spoke of her again, as if she had never existed. That is the end for the wicked, not glory but oblivion and disgrace. That night, under the starry sky, I stood on my balcony, a different balcony in a different home, one I had chosen for myself. I raised a glass of deep red wine and smiled into the darkness. Revenge was not the end, but a beginning. It had cleansed me, sharpened me. I had looked into the abyss, and instead of letting it consume me, I had learned to command it. The world was full of poisonous snakes like Kalen and Sienna, people who saw others as stepping stones. I would keep hunting them, not out of malice but out of a newfound purpose. I would protect what was mine, and I would ensure that the world I moved in was one of my own making. And if anyone dared touch me again, they would learn a simple final lesson. Hell is not far away. It is not a mythical place. It is something I can create with my own 2 hands. The years that followed were a study in quiet power. The Vance Group, under my sole leadership, didn't just recover. It ascended. We moved into cutting-edge technologies and sustainable ventures, fields the old guard like the Sterlings had never deigned to notice. My name, once whispered in connection to scandal and tragedy, became synonymous with innovation and ruthless, impeccable business acumen. I was no longer Alara, the pitying fool or the vengeful ghost. I was Ms. Vance. I never married. The very idea of it, of tying my life to another's in such a profound way, felt like a betrayal of the second chance I'd been given. The memory of the fall, of the child I lost, was a sacred wound, one I carried not as a burden but as a reminder. It kept me sharp, it kept me clear-eyed. I had partnerships, of course, both in business and in my private life. But they were on my terms, with contracts and conditions that protected the empire I had built from the ashes of my past. One crisp autumn evening, I was guest of honor at a university, giving a lecture on ethical leadership in the modern economy. The irony was not lost on me, and it brought a private, wry smile to my lips. As I spoke about accountability and long-term vision, I looked out at the sea of young, eager faces. Did any of them have a Kaelin or a Sienna in their past? Did any of them harbor the kind of secret that could either destroy them or forge them into diamond? After the lecture, during the reception, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 20, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a determined set to her jaw that reminded me of myself long ago. "Ms. Vance," she said, her voice steady but filled with a palpable reverence. "Thank you for your talk. It was transformative." "Thank you for listening," I replied, taking a sip of water. "My name is Clara," she continued. I wanted to ask you something. Your rise was so meteoric, especially after everything." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "How did you know which path to take when you were at a crossroads? How did you know who to trust?" I looked at her, this young Clara, and saw not a threat but a potential. A raw piece of steel waiting to be tempered. The world would try to break her or use her just as it had tried with me. I set my glass down. "You don't, Clara," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Not truly. Trust is a calculated risk, never a guarantee. As for the path..." I paused, the memories of 2 lifetimes flickering behind my eyes. "You don't find the path. You build it yourself. Brick by brick. And you make sure the foundation is made of something unbreakable. Yourself." She absorbed this, her brow furrowed in thought. "And if people try to stop you? If they betray you?" A slow, knowing smile touched my lips. "Then you ensure the consequences of their actions are a lesson they never forget. You don't seek revenge out of anger. You administer justice as a matter of course." I leaned slightly forward. "The world operates on certain laws, Clara. Gravity. Cause and effect. In business and in life you must learn to be an unshakable force of nature. Not the storm that destroys indiscriminately, but the tide that reshapes the shore." Her eyes widened slightly and I saw the understanding dawn there. It was a dark lesson, one I would never have given in my first naive life. But it was the truth that had saved me. I left her with that, moving through the crowd, a queen in her own realm. Later, as my driver navigated the city streets back to my penthouse, I looked out at the glittering skyline. In one of those countless buildings years ago, Kaelin Sterling had pushed me to my death. Now the city was mine. Every light seemed like a star in a constellation I had drawn. When I arrived home, the silence was a comfort. It was a chosen solitude, a peace earned through fire. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city far below. There was no fear, no vertigo. The fall had no power over me anymore. I had thought my revenge was the climax of my story. I was wrong. Living well, building a legacy that was untouchable, that was the true victory. Kaelin was a forgotten prisoner, Sienna a faded rumor. I was Alara Vance, and my name would echo long after I was gone, not as a victim or an avenger but as a creator. The past was a closed book. The future was a blank page, and I held the pen. I lifted my face to the window, to the reflection of a woman who had stared into the abyss and decided to build a kingdom there. It was more than enough. It was everything. The end.